Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Who the C-suite wants in the Oval Office, a question we are coming back to again and again today with David Rubenstein, private equity pioneer.
CEOs generally want to be with a winner.
And tech exec Joe Lonsdale, he says Silicon Valley support for former President Trump is growing, much on social issues.
I think in terms of protecting the United States of America, we need originalist judges, and that would be an amazing thing.
You could stand a couple more originalists.
All that today, plus the rest of the day's headlines. A cyber hack upsets car dealers. Weight loss drugs can do a whole lot. And Apple facing competitive fines from the EU.
Slap them all at 10%. If you can't generate your own revenue in the technology sector, just steal it.
It's Monday, June 24th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen. Andrew is reporting from the Aspen Ideas Festival. He will join us a little later this morning. Also, Bitcoin.
Crashing.
61,359.
Down from 70.
About 4. Yeah, we've been watching it for the month to date. As Joe's pointing out, you're down by almost 10%.
And 4% just today.
Yeah.
People are sending me stuff about, I don't know, liquidations based on, I don't know. They've got a lot of reasons for it. Something about sales following the halving and, I don't know, rates of mining. It's crazy, arcane stuff. But for whatever reason, that's a pretty big drop from 75 at one point. Breaking earlier this morning, EU regulators said Apple's in breach of sweeping new tech rules because it does not allow customers of its app store to be steered to alternatives. Under the Digital Markets Act, companies aren't allowed to block businesses from telling users about cheaper options for their products or about subscriptions outside of an app store. Apple does allow steering through a process on the app store, but EU regulators said that the process is too limited by restrictions that Apple imposes on developers. The European Commission also said it's opened a new probe into Apple over contractual terms it has with developers. In a statement, Apple said it's made a number of changes to comply with the Digital Markets Act, and it's confident that its plan does comply with the law. The Digital Markets Act allows the EU to penalize companies with fines of up to 10% of a company's global revenue.
That's crazy.
Apple reported
10% of global revenue, not of profits, 10%
right.
of everything you've sold.
$383 billion in revenues last year. The EU would love $38 billion. They could use it. They could use it since they have no innovation or really technology companies that are domestic themselves. So if you can't, if you're not going to...
Is there a point where you just say, forget it, I'm not doing business in the EU? That's...
We got some real success.
$30 billion?
I would do that to all the, all our great tech companies over here. I would be so bitter in the EU that I'd slap them all at 10%. If you can't generate your own revenue in the technology sector, just steal it. Wouldn't you? Huh?
We will take it.
You could get $1 trillion. You might get $1 trillion.
I mean, $38 billion.
The EU could use it.
Because we don't think that you're telling somebody and sending them off in a different direction where they can get a better bargain?
Right.
Okay. In other Apple news, the Wall Street Journal reports that Apple and Meta have held discussions about integrating Meta's generative AI model into Apple Intelligence. That's the recently announced AI system for iPhones and other devices. Apple's already partnered with OpenAI and has said that it hopes to integrate Google's Gemini as well. AI startups Anthropic and Perplexity have also been in discussions to bring their generative AI to Apple Intelligence. But again, it's starting to sound more and more like an app store for AI bots. They're not going to spend a lot of money on developing any of this stuff, but they'll make sure you can get access to whoever does. It's probably a smarter way for a consumer-facing business.
Guiltily, every once in a while, if I have a question, I might look, instead of trying to do it on Google to ask a question, sometimes it's easier. Mm-hmm. So I do it if there's no way that it can be they can't get any of their normal biases. And if it's a simple question, if I know that I'm not going to hate the answer because of the predisposition of
But that's why I kind of like search better, because then I can go back and see the source.
Then you can do it yourself.
And see the source for where it's coming from and decide if I believe it or not.
I was doing it the other day. about something, and you can get an answer without looking all over the place.
I can usually get an answer instantaneously from
you
Google
can from
search
search.
and see where it came from.
Right, without their own little personal innuendos and biases.
All right, right now an update on the cyber attacks on CDK that has crippled auto dealerships across the United States and Canada. Bloomberg reports that a group that claims responsibility for the hack demanded tens of millions of dollars in ransom, and that CDK was planning to make that payment. In a statement yesterday, CDK said that it has begun work to restore systems and that it expected that process to take several days. It did not comment on reports about ransom payments. The CDK outage has hampered sales, interrupted repairs, and delayed deliveries at roughly 15,000 dealerships. Shares of the Canadian parent company of CDK, Brookfield Business Partners, have slumped about 10% since that cyber attack began. Auto dealer network Group 1 Automotive just out with an update moments ago saying that the cyber incident has disrupted its processes in the United States, but that its dealerships continue to conduct business using alternative processes until CDK's dealer systems are available. Those alternative processes in some cases last week where dealerships were resulting to doing things with pen and paper.
Wow, can you imagine?
Eli Lilly says that it has applied for U.S. approval of its weight loss drug, Zep Bound, for the treatment of sleep apnea and expects regulators to make a decision as early as the end of this year. The company released data from 2 late-stage studies on Friday showing that Zep Bound helped to resolve obstructive sleep apnea in almost half of its patients. Lilly said an estimated 80 million patients in the United States experience the disease, in which narrowed or blocked airways interrupt their breathing during sleep.
Just so clear to me that you just should not be fat. I mean, asthma, blocked airwaves, blood pressure, fatness, squeezing your arteries, sleep apnea, blocked out. It's all about, all of this gets cured if you're not obese.
Lose weight, a lot of benefits.
I mean, are you not
correct?
Sleep apnea, and you see all the commercials, and they're gross. There's things you wear, and you got to clean them because there's rotting spittle that gets stuck in. You know those things, right?
Yeah.
And your spouse is next to you, and you look like you're flying a MiG shooting down,
No, it's
enemy pilot. I mean, it's even that can be solved if you lose weight. I'm going to do it without needles.
Lose weight without
Yeah,
needles?
I'm doing it without it. I mean, person administering my makeup today said I looked
thinner.
Can't you tell? You didn't mention it.
You look amazing. Haircut
and
too,
you
right?
do no haircut.
No, okay.
No, I put some stuff on the sides though.
Okay.
Because as the gray comes in, it gets frizzy.
Oh, some product.
Some stuff to just because it gets frizzy and it just. Maybe that's why I look thin. It might be the hair. Probably the hair. There is a tentative.
You know what it is? You didn't get a haircut. I thought you did. That
might be thinness. It might be. No, I'm down. I'm starving, but down. Winklevi.
Cameron and Tyler, those Winklevi, the Winklevoss twins, were partially refunded after their Bitcoin donation to Donald Trump's presidential campaign exceeded the maximum amount that was allowed under federal law.
They should check today. It might be under.
A campaign official told Bloomberg that each of the donors was refunded the portion above the federal limit of $844,600.
I'm not kidding. I think
down 10%. Well, it's still probably. Didn't they each give $1 million?
Yeah, they did.
In Bitcoin?
It's not quite.
It's unclear whether the refund was issued in Bitcoin or its cash equivalent. Donald Trump said last week that he met the brothers for the first time at a fundraiser that was hosted by David Sachs and Chamath Palihapitiya that happened in San Francisco earlier this month. So if it was $1 million and it's down 10%.
It's like, wait a second. Before we send this back to you, I think you're under. Pretty close.
Yeah, it moves pretty rapidly.
Right.
Tends to happen.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up, Joe and Becky are joined by Andrew Ross Sorkin from the Aspen Ideas Festival, and all three speak to tech exec and Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale. He says that there is a still quiet but growing support from American tech leaders for former President Donald Trump to take back the White House.
I'm on all these chats in Silicon Valley where they call it the omnicause. They're disgusted by how much it's breaking everything. I don't think people are rallying around Trump the person in Silicon Valley so much as they're rallying around this is insane.
More Squawk Pod is right ahead. This is Squawk Pod.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, cue.
Good morning and welcome back to Squawk Box, live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. Apparently there was a weekend
Lost that glow already?
that we supposedly had. It was nice. It was nice. It was hot.
It was beautiful.
But it was fast.
Fleeting.
It was fast. A 4-day work week. Is that?
Nope.
No, I'm against it.
Oh,
but
last week.
No, I'm against it. But should we talk about it?
How nice it would be?
Oh, whether we should do it. Yeah. I mean, I'm starting to think, as quick as these weekends are going, I'm starting to think we need to do something. I think we need.
4-day work week?
People are talking about it.
Work from home one day on Fridays?
Yeah, like everybody else that does that. Work from home. Yeah.
Although I did see something really funny about an IT guy who was told that he had to work in the office. He was not allowed to work from home, so he removed Teams and email from his phone, didn't answer his phone when his boss called in an emergency, and when they complained and said, "What happened to you?" He said, "I'm not allowed to work from home."
Yeah, but there are ways of monitoring and ways of getting around it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and you can get caught on that too, because then they have cameras that track what
Just
you're doing.
the idea that you need to monitor it and that people can cheat just shows you what it's all about.
Yeah, because if we want to goof around, we definitely have to be at home, not here.
You can't goof around. I mean, it's only
What are
3
we
hours,
doing?
but we're laying ourselves out there, putting ourselves out there on the line, and risking everything based on some inadvertent cancellation from ad-libbing. Are we not?
That is true.
Yeah, it is.
Tread lightly.
Exactly.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1. Up and Andrew, cue.
Good morning. This morning from Aspen, Colorado. I'm here at the Aspen Ideas Festival, where NBC is the media partner. We're going to be bringing you interviews throughout the week. Becky and Joe, so many folks getting here just over the past 24 hours. Bill Maher was here yesterday. Gwynne Shotwell of SpaceX later this week. We're going to be seeing Sam Altman and Brian Chesky, among others. We're also going to be talking to the new head of AI at Microsoft, someone we know pretty well. We're going to be seeing Mustafa Suleyman. We're going to bring you David Rubenstein in just a little bit. Actor Griffin Dunn, I should say character actor Griffin Dunn. You guys know him. I'll be speaking with Larry Summers also. And then on Thursday, we will have billionaire Peter Thiel, where we're going to talk just about everything. So a lot on tap from Aspen. And of course, one of the big issues is, yes, the presidential debate. They're doing a big watch party here. John Kerry and a whole bunch of politicians, by the way, have already been here and are going to be coming in and out all week. And I know that we'll be talking about that. Joining us right now to talk about big tech, the recent pushback against DEI, the 2024 election, all subjects that are being chattered about here. Joe Lonsdale is the 8 VC founding partner and the co-founder of Palantir. Good morning to you, Joe. We're going to be seeing your other co-founder, by the way, later this week right here. Peter Thiel is going to be joining us. I want to start, though, with the news of the morning, and it has to do with what's happening in Europe as it relates to Apple. You saw that Apple's now been accused of using its App Store improperly, claiming a regulatory problem. It's the first time that a U.S. company like this has been charged. I'm curious how you think about that news, but how, in a more broad context, what the implications are for U.S. businesses doing business in Europe and tech companies specifically.
Good morning, Andrew. You know, I am wary of giving European regulators any power whatsoever because they're pretty crazy people. But I think in this case, they probably are making a good point. Apple is a bully. Apple has attacked a lot of things kind of randomly. They changed their minds. They probably have too much power in the market. So overall, even though I'm a guy on the tech guy side, I'm a guy on the innovation side, not on the big bully side.
So that's interesting, though. I haven't heard you publicly come out against Apple, at least like that before. So you think they are a monopoly? They have too much power in the App Store? What's your take and what's your solution to it?
I can only speak to my personal experience, but you'll start building things that are important on top of Apple. When COVID started, a lot of really smart people said, what can we build on top of this for vaccine passports and for detecting, who's tested or not, just because we thought it was really important right when COVID started. We didn't know this was going to work. And they kept changing the rules on us. They kept changing the rules. They said, well, get a mayor to support it. I mean, you did. They said, now you need 3 mayors. Now you need a governor. And they said, actually, you've done all this work, spent 3 months on it. We're not going to allow it anymore anyway. So I think what Apple does is they do have a lot of stuff where, at the very least, something that's that powerful in our society needs to keep some consistent standards and not just bully everyone. So it is something to push back on.
What's the level of power, though? So if I said to you, for example, that I wanted to start a new app and I wanted you at Palantir to allow me to operate, to effectively operate on top of Palantir or to tap into your APIs, you'd say, Andrew, you're crazy.
Yeah, if something is used by a large percentage of your society, I think in a modern republic, in a modern democracy, it's okay to have some kind of standards we vote for, that if something's used by tens or hundreds of millions of people, there's going to be some consistency. So I think this is a tough trade-off that you have to decide at a level. I'd rather the regulators are not deciding. I'd rather the voters are deciding. So,
I mean, Joe, the idea that the regulators, EU regulators, can now say we are going to take 10% of your global revenue if you don't apply by these standards. I mean, that's crazy. It's like $38 billion that they're going to say.
Exactly. So I think, like I said at the start, I think European regulators are kind of arbitrary and are not the people that should be running things. And I think we should be pushing back on Europe in general. But I think they've picked a good battle on which to push, because you do have something that is a bully, and that our society does need to figure out what the rules are going to be for things that are that dominant.
There is some fear and loathing when Trump went out to Silicon Valley and actually had some people show up. And then, you had Schwartzman comes back, Bill Ackman maybe, Kathy Wood today. So you hear it, and then there's an immediate pushback. Wait a second. No Fortune 100 CEOs are actually giving any money. It's a quiet group that we're talking. Would anyone in the right mind say, I'm giving money to Trump at this point? Do you see a shift at this point?
Joe, switching us to Trump, Andrew. Listen, I think a lot of people are fed up with a lot of the policy that we're seeing right now. And I'm on all these chats in Silicon Valley where they call it the omnicause. They're disgusted by how much it's breaking everything. I don't think people are rallying around Trump, the person in Silicon Valley, so much as they're rallying around this is insane, the kind of broken stuff.
But you can see it. I was in Los Angeles this week. I'm not going to out anyone or imply that I talked to a lot of people, but there were a couple of people that told me that, and I was shocked at who they were.
I have a huge number of friends in the technology world who are going to be on the Trump side this time and are going to be against Biden. And again, I think it's not as much about choosing between the two men or the two personalities. You're seeing all this stuff just break things in our country. You're seeing us try to pass a CHIPS Act, which is a pretty bipartisan thing, and then nothing gets done because there's over a dozen ridiculous DEI things, and they can't find enough female construction workers, and so far our country's stalled because you have these crazy people in charge.
Anyone talk about two-tiered justice or a way of defeating your opponent?
Even my friends in the Valley who are voting against Trump, most of them who I know well admit, those are probably not felonies. Those are probably misdemeanors, and they're probably upgraded for the sake of politics. So no, I think a lot of people are disgusted and pushing back on what we're seeing right now.
Joe, just to that point, though, how many of those people do you think between now and the election either come out publicly or do give money, which becomes public, to Trump, or do you think that it remains this sort of quiet support that you're describing?
I think a lot of people have been waiting. A lot of people are waiting to see and make sure it really is going to be Trump versus Biden, to see how these things shake out. I think a lot of them, maybe sometime closer to August or September, are much more likely to come out in public. And listen, again, you have these people attacked by the FTC. You have people attacked by pretty much every agency there is. You have all this stuff we're trying to build, and the country can't build anything anymore because of these stupid rules in place. So yeah, I think a lot of people are furious, and they're waiting for the right time. And frankly, there's a little bit of safety in numbers, Andrew. People are waiting to all come out together because they saw when Peter came out by himself how much he got attacked and how much that ruined his life a little bit, unfairly, I think. And so people are hesitant.
What do you make of the arguments around the former president being either polarizing and or the larger worry that we hear about a lot about democracy, about the rule of law and what that ultimately portends?
The former president is certainly polarizing. It's certainly harmful to people overall to come out and support him has been the thing that we've seen. So people are waiting to do it together. In terms of rule of law, Andrew, I think the rule of law is very clear in this country. I think we have judges that were put in that are mostly originalists. Like the only really controversial thing that's happened with these judges is the abortion thing. And listen, I think a lot of originalists can argue to push to the states. That's not like an insane rule of law thing. That's like a reasonable disagreement in terms of a constitutional framework. What's very scary is the activist lawfare you're seeing and people who are not originalists, who are activist judges from the other side. So I definitely think rule of law is perfectly fine.
Classic, because it's a Rorschach test. That one man's rule of law. I mean, one side looks at rule of law and says, "Oh my God, Trump's at January 6th." The other side says, "Look at the way the lawfare is being waged against Trump." And
look at the judges being put in. The Federalist Society judges believe in the Constitution.
If a city judge or if a city prosecutor can decide to bring a case against a federal case against a former president, every municipality or local, I mean, it can happen anywhere to anyone.
So the personnel, Andrew, is what really matters here. You want to see personnel. Right. Yesterday, you had the synagogue in LA attacked, Jews not being allowed into the synagogue, and meanwhile, the same day, you're announcing that Biden's hiring these anti-capitalist, like pro-Linda Sarsour, really scary junior personnel.
Let me ask you on the personnel side. Let me ask you two questions. One is, if you look at the Heritage Group's 2025 plan, there really is an effort to effectively route a lot of staff that have been inside government. You may not like all of those people, but it does create questions about the ability to hire people with talent and expertise and experience over the years. So that's on one end. I want to hear your views on that. The second, though, is you heard President Biden say last week that he thinks actually there could be as many as 2 judges up for grabs on the Supreme Court, whoever becomes the president for the next 4 years. If Trump were to win and put 2 new judges in place, would you be happy as an American? And I'm actually very curious about this because
as an American?
No, as an American
how about
citizen,
as a human being? Use that line again. As a human being, don't you think that would be a bad thing?
To the extent that you have to represent, you'd like to think that you'd want a Supreme Court, I would imagine, that represents, that is somewhat representative of the country, How would you feel, Joe, if there were 2 more conservative judges on the Supreme Court, so that you would actually get close to the not just the majority, which you're already in, but the entirety of it, obviously for potentially a generation or more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would protect our country for a generation to have originalist judges who believe in the Constitution, Andrew. They just ruled 9-0 to protect the abortion drugs. These people are not activists. They're clearly trying to interpret the Constitution, and I think that makes us very safe. They're going to stop the unrealized taxes. They would destroy the innovation sector, and they're going to stop a lot of this nonsense. I mean, Jackson, who's the only person Biden put on, was the only one to very clearly say she wants a wealth tax. You do a wealth tax, you destroy our sector. So I think in terms of protecting the United States of America, we need originalist judges, and that would be an amazing thing for our
You could stand
country.
a couple more originalists.
That would be great.
That's a great answer. God bless you.
As we always say, it's a longer conversation, and it is. Joe Lonsdale, thank you so much for joining us.
We need to say anything else after that.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.
Next on Squawk Pod, David Rubenstein, Carlyle co-founder and philanthropist, weighs in on how corporate leaders are paying attention to the presidential race and how he's been looking at the people crazy enough to get in it.
I have said that the highest calling of mankind is private equity. Probably being president is more important than private equity.
You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. I'm here at the Aspen Ideas Festival this morning, and join us right now for a look at the state of the economy, the Fed's rate path, and so much more. We're going to get into politics, actually, as well. David Rubenstein, co-founder and co-chairman of the Carlyle Group. He's also now the owner of Major League Baseball's Baltimore Orioles. We'll talk to him about baseball. But actually, let's start where we were just talking off camera. You just did an interview with President Biden and former President Trump. And we've been having conversations all morning, both with Joe Lonsdale, who I believe is supporting President Trump. We also took to Jeff Sonnenfeld, who had that piece in the New York Times yesterday about CEOs and what he believes is not their support for Trump. What was your lesson from interviewing both of these gentlemen recently?
It's a book that I have coming out in September, and I have said that the highest calling of mankind is private equity, but I decided to actually call this book The Highest Calling because probably being president is more important than private equity. So the book is called The Highest Calling, and for that, it's a book about various presidents, but the last 2, I have interviewed them. I spent an hour with President Biden in the Oval Office, and then I spent about an hour with President Trump.
What was the revelation for you personally then?
I think the characterization of both of them is not accurate. accurate. I mean, President Biden could do the interview quite well. I mean, he answered every question, and the interview will be published. And President Trump was, during the trial that he was doing this, he did it before the trial one morning, and he seemed to be focused on it. And so there's no revelations that I think are startling.
You've been a Democrat for most of your life.
I'm an independent now.
You're an independent now. Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us who you plan to support?
I don't get involved in politics.
But you're a demonstrable friend of the current president. I mean, he stayed at your house.
He does stay at my house, but I friend with a lot of people.
But would you therefore not support him?
I don't support anybody publicly. I just vote the way I want to vote privately. But because I'm the chairman of the Kennedy Center, the chairman of the Library of Congress, chairman of the National Gallery of Art, I think it's best for me to be apolitical because I have to get money from Democrats and Republicans for the appropriations for the Kennedy Center, and I don't want to get in the middle of it.
So then let me ask you this, though. What do you make of the Jeff Sonnenfeld piece in the New York Times yesterday that effectively was saying that he didn't believe that the presidents of major companies in America were going to support President Trump? We then had an interview with Joe Lonsdale, who made the argument that he believes that there is a quiet support for President Trump, but it's actually much larger than is appreciated or known.
I think that CEOs generally want to be with a winner. As a general rule of thumb, most CEOs of big publicly traded companies are probably more Republican than Democratic, as a general rule of thumb. And generally, they have had some resistance to President Trump for all the reasons you know. But now that they think that President Trump has a reasonably good chance of winning, based on public opinion polls, I think they're drifting and coming home.
How should we think about that, though?
Well, I mean, business people generally like to be with a winner. They want to do what's going to help their company, and they think their company might be helped by some of the policies of Trump, rightly or wrongly.
Let's switch for a moment to business, if we could. Here we are on CNBC. You're in the private equity business. The path of the Fed has a huge impact on your ability to borrow money and how much you pay for it. Where do you think we really are?
Well, I think the Federal Reserve is very reluctant. I don't know for sure what they're going to do. Nobody knows for certain. I'm going to interview Jay Powell publicly on July the 15th in a public setting in Washington, and maybe he'll give us some insights then. But I think that generally the Fed wants to stay out of politics. And so I've always said that I think the Fed is not likely to cut rates before the election because it would just cause too much political turmoil. Generally, they're human, and they recognize that they'll be heavily criticized by President Trump, I suspect, if all of a sudden they were to cut rates right before the election. Therefore, I suspect the market is probably more right than wrong when it says the rate cuts are likely to come after the election.
Let me actually ask you just a Washington political question about the Fed. You know, the Fed has talked about its independence for a long time, and yet when you go back, even in the Volcker days and other times, there's been some pressure applied by presidents, sometimes very quietly, increasingly when it was former President Trump. Publicly, we've heard from, we've seen that Heritage 2025 report and others that have suggested that if he were president, at least some people that are around him want to have a lot more control of the Fed. Do you think that's in the cards?
I think that's unrealistic because I think trying to control the Fed now, given the way the country's evolved and the history of the Fed, would be damaging to the economy, and I don't think that would actually happen. I don't believe Republicans or Democrats on Capitol Hill would really support that in the end, and I think the American people wouldn't support that. The Fed has operated as the best central bank in the world for a long time, and I think destroying that would be a big mistake.
How would you grade this economy today?
I think the economy now is probably a B+. We're not an A, but nobody's probably an A right in the world right now. But we're doing pretty well. Remember, we've had high interest rates for quite some time, yet the economy is going to grow probably at 2.5% this year. That's pretty good for an economy with high interest rates. We've been predicting a recession for quite some time, 23, 24. It hasn't happened yet. So the economy is in reasonably good shape.
You have been a prolific fundraiser beyond some of the not-for-profit work you did, but a prolific fundraiser at Carlyle from pension funds and sovereign wealth funds around the world. There is a conundrum that is taking place in private equity today, which is that there have been very few exits, meaning that private equity has sold very few companies. A lot of pension funds have not gotten cash back, which means that you can't really go to them and say, hey, send me more money, because they say, I don't have money. You need to send me the money. A lot of folks have then gone to the Middle East to say, OK, we'll go after that money. Now in the Middle East, it appears they're saying, actually, you know what? We were sending you a lot of money. We need to spend some of that money here in the Middle East instead of back in America. As a fundraiser, what do you think of what's happening here?
Well, it's obviously tougher to raise money than it was years ago because we haven't had as many exits. But there's a new thing called private credit.
Yes.
And many people have been raising money in private credit, and there's a fair amount of money for that because interest rates have been high. So most of the large private equity firms also are doing large amounts of private credit, and so they've been raising money for that. And there are other things they raise money for, real estate, fund of funds. So the large private equity firms are not suffering. They could always do better, but I think you shouldn't cry for them.
How do you think about the marks, though, on all these private equity investments? Because they have gone up and up and up and up, and yet we haven't seen the realized sale of them yet.
Well, historically, when you raise money, you worried about the internal rate of return that you had and also the MOIC, the multiple on invested capital. Now the investors want something called DPI, which is to say, how much cash have you actually given me back? Don't tell me what the mark is or what it's going to be. Tell me what cash you're giving back. And so that's made it more difficult to raise money. But generally, I think that as the economy gets better, and it will get better because when interest rates come down, I suspect you'll see a loosening up of asset sales and more things will get sold.
What do you think of this new phenomenon where some private equity firms effectively are leveraging the leverage, meaning they're basically to get some cash out to give to people, they're effectively taking a loan on top of the loan?
These are continuation funds or things like that. I don't think it's any calamity has yet happened because of it. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. We've done it. Other firms have done it. I think it's not a terrible thing. I don't see any big crises that have happened because of it.
Any big investment theme that we need to know about before we let you go?
Well, I think sports.
Sports. Let's talk about this. How do you feel? How do you feel as an owner of the Orioles now?
Well, I now
had a bunch of losses and some wins, including against the Yankees.
We won the Yankees. We beat the Yankees 2 out of 3 recently, and 5 out of 7 so far this year. So we just lost 3 games to the Houston Astros, which in a row, which we didn't anticipate, of course. Sports is a very attractive area to invest, as you know. A lot of private equity people have gotten into sports,
right?
And very few people have lost money buying sports teams.
How much of this is an investment for you, and how much of this is just supposed to be fun?
This is mostly a philanthropic thing in the sense that I want to make money, and I have investors that come along with me. But I am from Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore, and I wanted to do something for Baltimore, and that's really why I did it.
David Rubenstein, we appreciate it. It's great to see you here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that is Squawk Pod for this Monday. Thanks for starting your week with us. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. And to get the smartest takes and analysis from our morning TV show right into your ears, well, follow Squawk Pod, this podcast, wherever you listen. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.